They say you only truly know someone once you've seen their dark side. I thought I knew everything about Sarah, my wife of 12 years. She wasn't perfect. Nobody is. But she had a magical touch that made the ordinary extraordinary. She laughed so loudly that her laughter filled the room and her thoughts raced with unbridled ambition. However, ambition and recklessness are two different things, and I was about to find out how far Sarah was willing to go in the latter. It all started with a debt I didn't know about. She never mentioned it, and I forgot to ask. We shared a home, a child, and a life, but apparently not everything. First and foremost, our financial problems. I had always been responsible, doing everything I could to control our spending, saving money any way I could, making sure we were prepared for Noah's education, and paying our everyday bills. Sarah was a person who lived in the moment, and that's what she does. I'm not going to completely condemn Sarah. She had dreams, and I respected them deeply. But when those dreams turned into a $20,000 expense that we didn't have, she could have at least warned me, but she didn't. No, she did the opposite. She went and borrowed the money without telling me and planted a financial grenade under me. Someone threw me a hot potato and said, "Enjoy." It all ended when she left, leaving my life in ruins. When I looked up, she was gone, along with her suitcase and my peace of mind. Noah was so stupid, he didn't see the storm coming. There was a note on the kitchen table in her handwriting. "I have to follow my heart. Deal with the debts, Jacob. They're yours now." At first I laughed. Not out of laughter, but out of surprise. Follow her heart? Was her heart somewhere on a yacht, sipping a margarita? Mine was here, in a mess of unpaid bills and betrayal. And then there was Noah. How do you explain to a 10-year-old that his mother has abandoned him? You can't explain it. At least not at first. He tells himself that he will protect him from all this chaos for as long as possible. And Noah is not an ordinary child. He is smart, too smart. It was one of those moments when I always felt enormous respect for his intellect, almost envying his insight at times like this. Sarah herself made the house feel emptier, not just in a spatial sense, but emotionally as well. She filled the space with a kind of regal authority that was never overbearing. Now she was gone, and all the rooms were empty. I leaned against the sink and stared hopelessly at her notes. God, where did I go wrong? Was it the arguments? The constant fighting over money? The nights I went to work while she worked on holidays we couldn't afford? Maybe it was all of those things. Maybe it wasn't. Maybe she didn't become this way suddenly. Maybe she was always like this and I was too stupid to notice until now. But Noah was there. He was my rock. A reminder that despite all the destruction Sarah had left behind, I still had something to care about. Now, he was my priority. Not debts. Not betrayal. Just him. So I shoved Sarah's scribbled note into my pocket and thought to myself, just because she had made her choice didn't mean she could dictate how we lived our lives. And of course, that was easier said than done. Sarah's wounds were already starting to open, and I hadn't even begun to assess the damage. And here, gasping for air, I breathe in your air, my lungs clearing of your breath. You are magnificent in your water, and through it all I can feel your perfume dancing, heavy and suffocating me from all sides. And yet I haven't lost the only thing she couldn't take from me, my iron will. But now I wonder if Sarah understood what she was sacrificing. Not just me, but Noah too. Did she think we could do without her? Did she not care at all? I may never know, but standing there in the kitchen, looking out the window at an uncertain future, I realized one thing. She had made her choice, and I had to make mine. Betrayal always hurts, but when it's shocking, it softens the emotional pain a little. Looking back, I noticed that cracks had begun to appear. The scariest thing is that you don't believe they can break, even when you see them, until they do. And when Sarah left, It wasn't just my heart that broke. My sense of security, my trust, and to be honest, my pride were shattered. The day after she disappeared, I paced around the living room like a caged animal. Every step was heavy with questions I had no answers to. Why didn't she tell me about this? How could she leave Noah? And the worst part was, what was she thinking? This new guy. Was he going to reveal the secret of her life that justified destroying our family and getting us into debt up to our ears? That morning, Noah walked into the wall I was staring at. "Dad, are you okay?" There was fear in his voice that shouldn't have been there in the voice of a 10-year-old child. I wanted to lie. I wanted to tell him that everything would be okay, that Mom would be back soon, and that one day we would all laugh about this. But you can't fool Noah. He looks at you when you talk like he's peeling the skin off your words to get to the truth you're not saying. So I didn't lie. I just softened the truth a little. "Your mom just needs a little break," I said, smiling as if it hurt me. "She's got a lot going on right now." He narrowed his eyes. I thought he was going to see through me, but he just nodded slowly, as if he had put the thought out of his mind. "Okay," he said, "but if you need anything, just let me know. I'll take care of it." And one phrase stuck in my head, more than Sarah's note could ever contain. He was 10 years old. He should have been worried about football practice and his math homework, not whether his father was going to be okay. But there he was, comforting me as if he were the adult, and I was the one who needed comforting. By evening, the news Sarah brought was even more shocking. I couldn't understand how this woman could pack her bags, walk out of the house, and leave with some strange man. I did everything I could to keep myself busy, cleaning, sorting bills, anything that would distract me from my dark thoughts. But it was all too obvious. The coffee cup she left on the table, the scent of her perfume, the half-read book on the nightstand. I was still in shock when Noah walked into the kitchen with a plate of peanut butter sandwiches. "You haven't eaten anything," he said, pushing the plate toward me across the table. I turned to him, my heart aching. "Thanks, buddy," I said, meaning that I should try some, not that I was hungry. He looked at me, then said the thing I had been desperately hoping to avoid all morning. "Is Mom coming back?" I froze. How could I answer that question? Sugarcoat it? Give him false hope? Tell an innocent lie that would ruin his life, or tell him the harsh truth? "I don't know," I admitted, "but whatever happens, we'll be okay. I promise." Noah looked at me intently. Then he nodded, as if he had decided to trust me. "Okay." The truth was, I didn't know if I trusted myself. That evening, while Noah slept, I sat alone in the dark living room, running my hands through my hair, trying to come up with a plan. I was drowning in a whirlpool of impossible and unsatisfactory options. But in a world of heavy, unbearable reality, there was one thing that kept me afloat: Noah. He was my anchor, weighty gray. Why I'll never break down. I took a deep breath, straightened up, and said, "We'll get through this, one step at a time." He didn't say anything, but something in the way he looked at me alarmed me. I recognized that look, the same laser focus he brought to a project, not stopping until he found the answer. It had started even earlier, actually, the moment I turned 18, but I was so consumed by panic that I barely noticed it. Later that evening, after Noah had gone to bed, I sat down again in front of the loan notification, my head spinning with unanswered questions. How had Sarah gotten that kind of money, and why did she need it? The answer was so close, yet so far away, like fog in the dark. And then there was the question of the empty bank account. Where was the money if she had withdrawn every last penny? Was it hidden in some offshore account, a nest egg for a new life with David? Or was she doomed, and the only evidence of her existence in this world were the bloody receipts that had been shredded and were now impossible to decipher? Her ambitions crushed. I had no answers, but one thing was clear. Sarah had left me with a problem I couldn't ignore. And although I could have wallowed in resentment and self-pity, I craved it and wanted to dive in like anyone else. I didn't think I could allow myself that luxury. Not when Noah was depending on me. So I did what I always did. I took a deep breath, rolled up my sleeves, and braced myself for the storm. Because if there was one thing I had learned in life, it was that you couldn't run away from your problems. The only thing you could do was face them head-on, painfully, inch by inch. You'd think I'd hit rock bottom when I found out I was $20,000 in debt and my savings were running out. But not so fast. Rock bottom has a way of showing up at the worst possible moment to remind you how many more obstacles you have to overcome. The next few days were a blur. Bills, emails, failed attempts to contact Sarah. I was hysterical, trying to come up with some kind of plan, anything, to keep the avalanche of debt from burying us in our sleep. But just as I was finally starting to feel some satisfaction, disaster struck out of nowhere. The first surprise was that Sarah had put our house up as collateral for a loan. She had taken out a mortgage. Then came the official letter threatening legal action if the payments weren't made immediately. But the silence was unbearable. Sarah didn't answer the phone. It was as if she had simply vanished. Poof. And if I could penetrate the trail she left behind, I would have to sift through the debris. I couldn't even talk to her. I couldn't demand an explanation. All that remained was her folded farewell letter, a cruel reminder of how quickly she had disappeared. And then Noah appeared. My son. My rock. My endless source of strength and guilt. He didn't know all the details of the crisis, but he knew enough to be concerned. I see it in his eyes when he looks at me, his brow furrowed in concentration, as if he's trying to solve a puzzle beyond his years. And every time he sighed in response, "It's okay, Dad. I'll figure it out." A suffocating weight of failure pressed down on my chest. On one of those nights, hunched over the kitchen table staring at the numbers that stared back at me defiantly, one became two, then something else. That's when everything changed. The math didn't lie. I couldn't pay the loan or cover our expenses. Something had to change. But it couldn't be Noah. Newspaper ads didn't help. Neither did friends, relatives, and acquaintances he could once turn to for help. But now, in a recovering economy and with social distancing, he knew all too well that he was one of 130 million unemployed Americans, and even more. But my God, how could I give him up when everything else was going to hell? "Dad?" His voice pierced my panicked thoughts. I looked up and saw him standing in the doorway, his expression neutral but serious. "Are we going to be okay?" I hesitated. The truth choked me, pressing down on my chest so that I couldn't speak, but I couldn't lie to him. "I don't know, kid," I admitted, "but I promise you that we will do. We will do everything in our power to make sure that doesn't happen." He nodded as if he knew exactly how I would react. Then he sat up straight and, without pausing, placed his small hand on my shoulder. "It's okay," he murmured. "I have an idea." I blinked, looking at him. An idea. "Noah, this isn't homework. We're talking about $20,000. This isn't a problem that can be easily solved with a few planning principles." "I know," he said. His voice was so calm that I felt both comforted and scared. "You're not alone in this. You don't have to do this alone." My instinct was to brush him off, to assure him that this was an adult problem, that he shouldn't worry about it. But he looked at me in a way that made me stop. It wasn't just determination, it was understanding. He wasn't just trying to help. He truly believed he could. And I nodded. "Okay, buddy. What's your idea?" His lips twisted into a crooked smile, and for the first time in days I felt warmth in my chest. "You'll see," he said, smiling and disappearing into his room. The next morning, we found him hunched over his tablet, tapping away at the screen and causing explosions. When I asked what he was doing, he replied, "Research." When I asked him to explain, he smiled like a devil and replied, "You'll find out soon enough." At first, I thought it was just a defense mechanism, a distraction that made him feel like he was helping. But as the days went by, it became clear that something was wrong. Important moments. He started asking strange questions about Sarah, her mannerisms, her favorite places. He even wanted to know if I had access to her email. I did, but I had no intention of using it. "Why do you need to know all this?" I finally asked one evening. "Just trust me," he repeated, the same determination shining in his eyes. "I'll take care of everything." To be honest, I didn't know what to do. Part of me wanted her to respond, to let me know that I was the keeper of her secrets. But another part of me, the part I couldn't put into words, wanted to submit to him. Maybe it was desperation. Maybe it was just the beginning of realizing that he was much smarter than I had ever thought. Whatever it was, I pushed it aside. And for some reason, watching him, I felt a strange comfort. And for the first time in all the months since Sarah had left, I truly felt, really felt, that we had a chance to make it work. The moment everything changed. Looking back, I realized that was the turning point. It wasn't just about the debt or Sarah's betrayal. It was about us, me and Noah. We were much stronger than she or he could ever tear us apart, no matter how hard they tried. And soon I realized how naive it was to think that Noah's words, "I'll take care of it," could have such power. Sarah's call. I almost laughed. Her anxiety was so intense that it couldn't even be contained. "All you want to know is what happened." "What?" I said, feigning innocence. "I thought you knew what you had to do, Sarah. Your love, your freedom, my $20,000. Isn't that what you always wanted?" "Jacob, this isn't funny," she snapped, her voice tinged with irritation. "David is furious. He got me into a legal mess and now he's being questioned at work about the loan," he said. "What have you done?" "Me? I didn't do anything," I said, enjoying the pause in the conversation she had created with her scream. "For the sake of our son, you may have beaten me at my own game." Then there was a pause, a long one, so heavy, so tense, that it seemed as if it would break at any moment. "Noah?" she finally replied, her voice trembling. "Why did Noah get involved in this?" "That's it, Sarah," I said, now defiant. "It's as if while you slipped away to live your new life, Noah picked up all the mess your life was in and put it back together. He found out what you were doing, reported your loan fraud to the bank, and managed to freeze your account before you could spend another cent." "No, that can't be," she whispered, gasping for breath. "He's just a child." "No," I said, and a smile appeared on my face. "He's our child, and he's 10 times smarter than you think." Her voice trembled with rage and despair. "You have to fix this mistake, Jacob. They'll say I'm the one who committed fraud." "Maybe you did," I replied, the mockery evident in my voice. "You stole money, based your actions on lies, emptied our savings account, and left your family in financial ruin. What did you think would happen?" Her breathing was ragged and labored over the phone. "I didn't want it to turn out this way," she whispered. "I thought it would be a new beginning." I clenched my teeth as her words hit me like a hammer. "A new beginning? Leaving your son and me broken? You call that a clean slate?" "I didn't think—" she started, but I cut her off. "No, you didn't think," I hissed. "You didn't think about the mess you left behind, about what you wanted to burden Noah and me with. You only thought about yourself." There was a pause, and then she said something I would never have said. "I'm sorry." I froze. I was struck not so much by the apology itself as by the honesty behind it. My wife, Sarah, was gone. Sarah, with whom I saw my future, and who saw her future with me. But it wasn't enough. It wasn't enough anymore. "I'm sorry doesn't excuse you, Sarah," I said firmly. "I'm sorry doesn't erase your debt, doesn't undo the damage you've caused. If you care, and you know you have to face this, then go and do it." Her silence was deafening. It would mean losing everything, and I could see it in her eyes, her freedom, her life with David, perhaps even her dignity. And she wasn't going to give that up, no matter how deep her remorse was. "I can't," she finally said so quietly that her words were barely audible. "Well, then I can't help you," I replied flatly. "Jacob, please," she begged. "David says he's leaving me. Without him, I have nothing." "Well, maybe you should have thought about that before you left," I said. "But don't worry. The authorities will be happy to help you sort everything out." I hung up without letting her say a word. My heart was pounding in my chest, my fingers were shaking. It wasn't anger or irritation. It was the sudden realization that this woman talking to me on the phone was now a stranger to me. The woman I had devoted my life to was dead, and Sarah was here in her place. This was not the mother he needed. Now she was a shadow of her former self. "Dad?" Noah's voice interrupted the whirlwind of thoughts in my head. I turned around, and there he was, standing with his arms crossed, leaning against the door frame, a broad smile on his face. "She sounded scared." "Yes, she's scared," I said, forcing myself to smile. "You did well, Noah. You did really well." The smile that spread across his face was a mixture of pride and relief. "What now?" Now! I exhaled one last time, feeling the weight of the approaching mass. "We'll wait, and we'll make sure she never hurts us again. Because if I've learned anything, it's that Sarah didn't just run away from her mistakes. She ran away from herself. And no matter how fast she drove, the truth was always close behind, waiting for the moment when she appeared in the rearview mirror, rebuilding our lives." Now Noah stood in the police station and looked at me with determination in his eyes. "Now it's our move," he said. The second problem was what to do about the fake loan. But I didn't give up that easily and called the bank with irrefutable proof that Sarah had lied. It was a difficult task that required countless letters and phone calls, but in the end, they gave in. The loan was canceled pending the outcome of the investigation. It's hard to say how relieved I felt. We were no longer facing a $30,000 debt. For the first time in many years, I could breathe freely without feeling like there was a sword hanging over my head. Having overcome the crisis, I began to think about Noah's future. I hired a lawyer to ensure that Sarah's stupidity would no longer threaten our stability. I could get sole custody because she had left us and was not earning any money. The case was clear. Sarah had not just walked out of our lives, she had effectively renounced her parental rights. During the custody hearing, which Sarah did not attend, there were no problems. I was granted sole custody and a court order for her to pay me $500 a month in child support. I didn't think she would ever pay, but when I talked to a lawyer, he told me that as soon as she started working, her wages could be garnished and everything would be settled. And the camper, a symbol of her betrayal, parked in our yard like a ghost that wouldn't go away. It was a useless thing that shouldn't have been kept. How could we not have realized that we should sell it? And although it didn't sell for the $35,000 we paid for it, the money from its sale was a small cushion, a small, if not giant, step toward restoring our financial situation. Noah had been stable throughout this time. He did his chores, offered to take on extra responsibilities without waiting for it to become clear what needed to be done. One evening, as we were folding laundry together, he said something that pierced my heart like a dagger. "You know, Dad," he said slowly, his words sounding like the sounds of the I Ching echoing through the air. "I have this feeling that Mom was never happy. Not with herself, not with us, not with anything. Maybe that's why she did all this." I looked at him, impressed by his insight. "You're probably right, Noah," I told him. but you don't treat other people badly because you're unhappy. How we move forward is up to all of us." He hesitated, then slowly shook his head. Finally, he said, hesitantly, "I'm glad you're my dad. You never give up." Those words hit me like a wave in the ocean. All the guilt and self-doubt I had harbored for not protecting him from Sarah's behavior evaporated in that moment. The last thing Sarah did was sow chaos, and I couldn't deal with that. All I could think about was how we were going to get through this. And we moved on. The final step was to prevent Sarah from further destroying our lives. With the help of a lawyer, I created legal barriers to prevent her from accessing Noah or our money without a judge's permission. It wasn't a guarantee against idiotic behavior, but it gave me some peace of mind knowing that she couldn't just come back and destroy everything we had fought for all this time. And when it was all over, no one asked, "Are you okay?" After all, did we really need to plan our entire lives for a few months to get through so much turmoil? But during that time, we went from being victims of her deception to victors over our own fate. We weathered storms and went through trials together, and although they were difficult and blurry, we were grateful for the scars that remained as proof of our vibrant lives. I would like to say that Sarah changed, that she learned from her mistakes, that she became the person I hoped she would become, and I would love to say that there was a moment, a flash of insight, a realization of her mistakes that made it all possible. But life doesn't come as a gift with a bow and a happy ending. As far as I knew, she was still struggling, working odd jobs, barely making ends meet. Sometimes I felt sorry for her, but I wasn't attached to that sympathy before, and I wasn't going to let it lure me back into her web again. This was the greeting she had come up with for herself. It was just time to live by it. The storm had passed, but debris still littered the ground where Noah and I were trying to rebuild our lives. But now, for the first time in what seemed like forever, we had hope. Hope that we could see beyond the broken home we had become and see a more whole family. It started with the little things. Without Sarah's restless energy that made this house feel like home, the mornings were much less lively. Noah is a strategist by nature, so he wanted to figure out how to make our daily plans more efficient. One afternoon, he pulled out a super detailed, color-coded schedule he had made. He had one of those. "I learned all this in American corporations, Dad," he said, waving the chart that would have inspired even the best corporate planners. I smiled and shook my head. "You're only 10 years old, you know that, right? You should be into video games, not home logistics." He grinned. Someone had to keep this house in order. Moments like these reminded me of how much he had grown over the past few months. He wasn't just my son anymore. He was my partner, my rock. Finally, they felt that financial stability was within reach. Selling their camper had brought in some money they could put into savings, and the loan that had once been so large it overshadowed everything else in their lives was gone with it. I worked shifts whenever I could, driven by my obsession with getting Sarah's savings back. It was a tough fight, but every dollar saved was a victory. We were one step closer to the day when we wouldn't have to look back. Even the well-prepared Noah did his job damn well. One afternoon, I came home and found him in the kitchen with a tray of warm cookies cooling next to him. "What's that?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. "I'm starting a cookie business," he said, like a child who had just come home with a new tooth and was announcing his new venture, and handed me a flyer he had made at school. 50 cents a cookie. All proceeds go to the Jacob and Noah Fund. It made me laugh. A laugh that came from deep within, unadulterated joy. "I hope you never have to do this," I said, stroking his hair. "The pain that never goes away." Not every day was a day of victory and triumph. Some nights, the past was a burden whose weight was eternal. Instead of sleeping, I relived Sarah's betrayal, the moment that preceded the moment everyone else in my life saw, and wondered if I should have done something different, anything, between that moment and the disaster that followed. And I watched Noah stare into the distance. She was his mom, and he could never be ashamed of that. Even if he was angry with her and had to crawl through the mud trying to get rid of the fact that he treated her like any other person when he happily told the whites they could go to hell for treating him like he was less than them. But that didn't change the reality. She was always his mom, and no one could deny that. One night, while we were watching a movie in the living room, he asked me a question I wasn't ready for. "Do you think she'll ever come back?" I froze, surprised by the question. "I don't know, buddy," I replied honestly. "But if she does come back, it will be in our time. You have to earn it. Show her that you're worthy of being the mother she should be." He nodded thoughtfully. "I hope not," he said softly. "But it's okay. We're doing just fine without her." It was bitter to hear those words, but they burned me and ignited an unbearable pride within me. Weeks turned into months, and a new normal emerged. Not the normal we had known before, but a new momentum that seemed like it would last forever. We found comfort in small, everyday joys. Cooking dinner for him or for myself, or for both of us if we decided to share. Playing board games on the weekends. Spending evenings on the porch watching the world that wasn't ours. No big surprises, no life-changing events, just the daily, painstaking work of rebuilding. Noah's last words. One evening at dinner, Noah looked up and said, "Dad, I think we're going to be okay." My heart filled with warmth, and I smiled. "Yes, son, I think so too." Sarah's betrayal left scars, but it also hardened us and made us stronger. It revealed Noah's strength, his fierce loyalty, and his ability to adapt. And it awakened my own strength, a fierce determination to do right by him, that inner caged animal hungry to survive this and give my son a better life, wherever this journey took him. Now that I know Sarah's departure wasn't the end of our story, I understand why it happened. It was a new chapter, one that Noah and I would write on our own terms, untouched by the storms of the life she had run from. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but as I watched Noah that day, already working on his next project, I felt something new, something deep and comforting. Peace. Whatever lay ahead, I knew one thing. We would fight together, and together we could endure anything.